Hi everybody, and welcome to another video. This video we're gonna go over the Bisqueware and Glazeware stage for like tools and stuff that I prefer to use during these stages. I'm going to be doing both the bisque and the glaze because there's not a ton of tools that I use in this stage. A lot of my tools are for, you know, throwing and the leather hard stage and stuff like that. So there's not as many tools, so I feel like I can kind of combine both the Bisqueware stage and the Glazeware stage. I also occasionally do lusters, so this is going to be second to the last video. I am going to do a video on all the tools that I use for lustering. There are a lot of tools for lustering and I feel like it needs its own video. And the lustering happens after the Bisqueware and the Glazeware stage, so I figured that would be a good end video. We're going to get into my favorite tools for the Bisqueware Glazeware stage. And of course we've got to start with the kiln, right? That's the first most important tool that you need. Here is the kiln. It is a Skutt kiln and it is called a Glaze Tech. The reason why I got this kiln was because I didn't have the wiring I needed to be able to have a higher voltage kiln, and so I got a kiln that would work with what was available with my house without needing any rewiring and things like that. So it is a smaller kiln and I am working on getting the permits and the rewiring stuff taken care of so that I can have a bigger kiln, and two, working on saving for a bigger kiln. So here's the kiln. I'm not going to open it because as you can see it's at 200 degrees. I just ran a bisque fire, and your kiln will last longer if you're nicer to it. The recommendations in the manual are to not open it till it is at 126 or less, I believe it is. So I usually wait till it's cool enough to open. That doesn't always happen, but I try to do it as often as I can to kind of preserve the life of the kiln. It has been like 5 or 6 years since I've gotten it, and it's been working great. I haven't had any issues. I haven't really had to even replace anything besides, you know, the thermocouple I usually do every 6 months to a year. Usually, because I have to fire it so frequently, it usually ends up being about 6 months where I have to change the thermocouple. Yeah, so that's my kiln. I do show the inside of my kiln when I'm doing unloadings and things like that on my Instagram. And also, if you haven't had a chance, I usually do a compilation video of how I created the pieces from beginning to end for the product launches or shortly after the product launches. So you can kind of see my whole process for that particular collection. I do a couple different techniques, so those are kind of fun to watch to see how I went about doing it. They're also pretty chill videos. I usually throw in some nice piano music. You can kind of just chill and watch my process and see how I create the things. Yeah, so if you're really curious about what it looks like inside, how much I can fit in it, I recommend checking out those compilation videos. It'll kind of give you a good idea of how I use the kiln and how much I fit in it and things like that. That's kind of the big one. Obviously you kind of need a kiln or have access to a kiln to be able to do a bisque fire, glaze fire. And if you don't have a kiln or it's not something that's really in your budget, I would recommend checking out, one of the links below is kind of a national thing where you can check out if there's any places around you that have kilns that can be used, or that you can rent. And so it's kind of a cool thing to see if you have anybody around you that would be willing to do it. The only other thing I suggest if you don't have a kiln and you'd like one is to check out, see if you have any local studios, any local potters that would be willing to help you fire your things and rent your kiln. So the next tool for me, and I think any potter who's going to be making functional work that is usable with food, with drink, like I said, I do mugs, I do tea stuff, occasionally I make plates. It is absolutely 100% a must to have this next tool, and you should be using it. That is Kiln Cones. So along with, you know, needing the kiln, you will need Kiln Cones. Now, where the argument gets in here is that a lot of people are like, well, my kiln reads the temperature, and you know, that's what the thermocouple is for. Make sure that the kiln is getting to the temperature it needs to. But electronics can fail and things can happen to your kiln, so it could be reading that it's perfectly fine in there, but you don't actually know for sure. The things that the cones do is they show you an accurate temperature. They will melt at the cone that they are supposed to melt at. So for those of you guys who might be a little bit beginner with how to work a kiln. There are temperatures, and generally potters tend to measure those temperatures to a cone. So Bisqueware usually stays at an 04, 03. Some people will only fire to an 06. And those are like lower temperatures. And you can also just check the web if you check like cone list. A lot of times there's like free graphs and stuff that kind of show you what exact temperature is considered for what kind of cone it is. So the thing that these do is these will measure that cone. So your Bisqueware is lower, your clay's not vitrified, it just makes it a little bit more absorbent so that you can go ahead and put your glazes on. So what I would use is an 04 cone to make sure that it actually got to temperature. And what happens when you put these in the kiln is they will actually melt. And they will melt to varying degrees depending on how hot your kiln gets. Now the thing that is really imperative with what I did is my kiln was actually telling me it was getting to the temperature, but it wasn't getting to the temperature. It was actually firing colder than what it said it was firing to, which is a big deal if I am trying to sell food safe vitrified mugs and the cone, you know, and I wouldn't have known if I had not used the cones. And it's very important to make sure that you're firing your kiln to the temperature the clay needs to be at. So for B-Mix, it is recommended it fires to a cone 5, and because my kiln fires a little lower than it's supposed to, I actually tell it to fire to a cone 6, and it ends up firing to a high cone 5. But like I said, these are things I wouldn't know unless I had actually been using the cones to measure. Like, if I hadn't used the cones to measure, I would have thought a cone 5 would be fine. But then my clay wouldn't be completely vitrified and might get leakage, or the glaze might have not completely fired to the piece. So now that I've gotten done with my kind of tirade about cones, as where I'm not as picky with my Sgraffito brushes, I'm actually a little bit more picky about my glazed brushes. I tend to keep the two separate. I do have kind of smaller brushes and stuff I tend to use with my Sgraffito, and then I have bigger brushes and specific brushes that work really well for glazing. I do hand glaze my pieces. A lot of times I do glaze combos and things like that, and they require a little bit more precise application than you really get with dipping and pouring. I will usually like dip or pour my inside liner glaze. I do all the pieces with my inside liner glaze, and you'll see if you buy any of my pieces, they'll have the same liner glaze. Again, it has to do with food safety, and I am going to be doing a video on how I test my pieces and how I make sure they're food safe and ready to sell in another video later on after I'm done with all the tools videos. But anyways, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. As far as hand brushing goes, I have a couple brushes that I prefer. One is a fan brush. I can't seem to find my fan brush. I also really like this one, and it's got like huge surface area, and they just need to be super absorbent to be able to hold a lot of glaze, and that's going to be the easiest and the fastest way to get the glazes that you want done. I usually use these for like the base coats, or if I'm doing my clear, that's usually all just a couple coats of clear. And this brush and my fan brushes work awesome. Okay, so these are the brushes that I prefer to use for glazing. Really big, wide brushes that tend to be really absorbent. But the next one is the sanding pads. So I do use DiamondCore tools for sanding. I think they're awesome. I don't know if Amazon carries them. If they don't, I will make sure to just include a link to their shop. I'm not going to get paid or any commission or anything like that off of it. But I'd rather you find tools that are going to last long, that are going to work for you. Because you can get sanding things and stuff from, you know, hardware stores and stuff. But I find with Pottery, they're not really going to last you very long. But I will say, although they're more expensive, these sanding pads are awesome from DiamondCore tools. Little hand sanding pads, and they will last you a very long time. I have been using them for years, at least like 4 years, 5 years. I just had to buy a new one because they're finally on their last leg and they weren't working very well. So they will last you a long time. And as far as sanding goes, I do it both in the bisque stage if it really needs it, like if my Sgraffito is a little rough, or if I notice the feet are a little off, I will do it in that stage. Most of my sanding though really just happens with the feet and the bottom of the mug after the glazed fire. But this works great for both the Bisqueware and the glazeware, and these are what I used for the longest time for both parts of the stage. If they needed sanding or needed any extra attention on the bottoms, or you know, on the Sgraffito or things like that, so that I didn't have any sharp burrs or bumps or things like that, These work awesome. I generally tend to use, I would do that grit first. That would be the first pad that I used, and then I would go back over to kind of smooth out things and make it more of a smooth texture with like a 120 or a 240 is usually what I use for that. And then as far as the glazeware stage, I use this one. This is also, all of these are from DiamondCore tools, and they're awesome. They last a long time. This one I like. It attaches to your wheel. You just throw some water on there and it will sand the bottom of your pieces to make sure that it has a smooth bottom, that you're not ruining people's furniture if you're selling like more functional work that people are going to be using every day. They're also really good at getting off glaze if they run and stuff. I don't usually have that problem. I will sell them at seconds if I do get them, but this does really help a lot at getting all the extra glaze off the bottom of the piece. If it does run onto your kiln, I have found that I can use this to get all the extra glaze off of the piece and kind of make it functional still, but you know, maybe not as aesthetic, so I usually sell them at a lower price. I think this one's a 120. I will have to double check, but I will link it below, whatever grit it is. But I think I picked one that was kind of a little bit more all-purpose. Sanding pieces will make clay dust come up in the air, especially B-Mix. B-Mix has tons of clay dust, so it's very important to be careful with it. I will wear my mask. I have a mask, which I can also link below, and it's really important to do it outside, do it with a mask. Make sure you're not getting that dust and stuff in your lungs. It can cause a lot of health issues in the future for you. So it is very important that you stay safe with what you're doing. So really quick, this is the mask. These are not the correct filters. These are actually filters for doing luster, because that's the last thing I did. So that's what they're on the mask. But I will make sure to link the appropriate filters and the face mask that I use for sanding, and I do highly recommend it if you are going to be doing sanding. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the tools that I prefer to use in the different stages. If you have any other questions or any other tools you'd like to know about or see if I've used or have any questions about, feel free to drop in the comments. I would love to answer any questions that I can and to help you kind of find what you need. Remind you to make messes, make mistakes, enjoy that process, and I will see you guys in the next video.